The night I decided to sell my father's store forever, a stranger walked in. And he knew something only my dead father could have known. This is David's story, and the night a stranger changed everything. David ran a small hardware store on Main Street, the same one his father Frank had built from nothing 40 years earlier. Frank had passed away 6 years ago, quiet and sudden. In the back office of the store he loved more than almost anything else in his life. David had grown up sweeping these same floors after school, stacking the same shelves his father now stocked from memory, learning the business the way most kids learn a family language, without ever really choosing to. David had kept it running out of loyalty more than logic. Big chain stores had opened on the highway. Foot traffic had slowed to almost nothing most weeks. He was 2 months behind on rent for the building, and a corporate buyer had already made an offer to turn the whole block into a parking structure. His wife, Rachel, gently suggested more than once that maybe it was time to let it go. She wasn't wrong about the numbers. David always changed the subject anyway. Selling the store felt like selling the last physical place his father had ever existed. The counter Frank used to lean on, the back office where he'd died with his boots still on. Frank's old hammer still hung on a nail behind the register, worn smooth in the handle from 40 years of use. David never used it, he never moved it either. He hadn't told Rachel how close he actually was to signing the papers. He'd been carrying that alone for almost 2 weeks, same as he carried most things these days. That Friday night, David planned to close early, go home, and finally call the buyer back in the morning. He'd already rehearsed what he'd say. Rain started just after 7, hard and steady against the front windows. David was locking the register when the bell above the door rang. An old man stepped inside, shaking rain off a worn coat. He asked for one specific size of copper pipe fitting, precise down to the exact model number, an oddly specific request for that late in the day. He didn't glance at the price tag once. He paid in exact cash, counted out to the penny, before David had even rung it up. Then he stood there a moment, looking around the entire store slowly, almost carefully, the way someone looks at a place they used to know by heart. His eyes paused on the hammer hanging behind the register. "Your father used to keep those in a different aisle," the old man said casually, "back when this place still had that old green awning out front." David froze. The green awning had been replaced almost 15 years ago. Nobody in town mentioned it anymore, not even his own mother. "He almost lost this place once, too," the old man continued, "back in his 2nd year. Bank was ready to close him out over a missed loan payment in March." David had never told anyone that story. He'd only heard it once himself, from his father, late one night, years before Frank died. The old man smiled faintly, thanked him, and walked back out into the rain before David could ask his name. By the time David reached the door to call after him, the street outside was empty in both directions. David didn't sleep much that night. He sat with his father's old ledgers instead, the ones he'd kept boxed up in the back room since the funeral. He found the entry from that March, decades earlier. His father really had nearly lost the store then, exactly as the stranger described, in his father's own handwriting. Something about hearing it again, from someone with no possible way to know it, made David feel like his father was still somehow present in the building. He didn't call the corporate buyer back that morning. Instead, he called his old supplier, someone Frank used to work with, personally, and asked for one more chance on inventory terms. The supplier, an older man himself, remembered Frank fondly and agreed without much convincing. He rearranged the front of the store the way his father used to keep it, back when neighbors would stop in just to talk, not just to buy. He even found the old green paint code in one of his father's ledgers and ordered a new awning to match. He started opening 30 minutes earlier, mostly out of habit, half hoping the old man might wander back in. He kept a fresh pot of coffee going by the register, too, the way Frank always had, for anyone who wanted to sit and talk for a minute. Slowly, word got around town that the hardware store on Main Street was still open, still run by Frank's boy, still worth walking into. A few older customers came back just to see the awning restored. Business didn't explode overnight, but it steadied. For the first time in over a year, David didn't dread opening the mail. Rachel noticed the difference before he even told her why. She started stopping by after work again, the way she used to before things had gotten so hard. David couldn't stop thinking about the stranger. He asked around town, described the old man to anyone who'd listen. The worn coat, the quiet voice, the way he said "your father" instead of "your dad." The same way Frank's own generation used to talk. Nobody remembered seeing him. Not the diner 2 doors down. Not the gas station attendant who saw everyone who passed through town after dark. Not even the elderly regulars who knew practically everyone within 20 miles. David started to wonder if he'd imagined the whole conversation. Some kind of exhausted, grief-soaked hallucination he'd constructed out of desperation that one specific night. He almost convinced himself of it, more than once. The corporate buyer called again, twice, more aggressively this time, hinting that David was running out of time to accept a fair price before the offer disappeared entirely. There were numbers involved that would have solved every problem David had, if he could just say yes. Rachel started to worry, gently, that David was chasing a ghost instead of facing the real decision in front of him. She didn't say it unkindly, but she said it more than once. "Maybe it was just an old customer," she said one night, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "Maybe you're looking for a sign because you don't want to be the one who lets it go." David didn't have a good answer for that. Some nights he believed her completely. Other nights, alone in the store after closing, he found himself staring at the door, half expecting the bell to ring again. Coffee still warm on the counter, just in case. He kept the store open. He couldn't fully explain why, even to himself, and that uncertainty followed him into every quiet hour behind the counter, into every conversation with Rachel he cut short before it went too deep. 3 weeks later, cleaning out a shelf in the back office Frank had used until his last day, David found an old photograph tucked behind a row of dusty catalogs. It was Frank, much older than David had ever seen him in real life, since his father died relatively young. The photo looked digitally aged, something Frank had apparently done himself years earlier just to see it, written on the back in his father's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't be there when you needed me most, so I hope somehow I still found a way." David stared at the photograph for a long time. The worn coat in the image, the quiet set of the mouth, the exact way the old man in his memory had smiled by the counter, eyes drifting toward that same hammer behind the register. It was the same man, older, imagined, hand-aged in a photograph decades ago, and somehow standing in his store on the one night David had been ready to let everything go. David never told anyone what he believed happened that night. Not fully, not even Rachel. Some things don't need to be proven to be true enough to live by. What he knew for certain was that his father, in some form he couldn't explain, and didn't need to, had kept his promise to still be standing there when David needed him most. David never took the corporate offer. The hardware store on Main Street is still open today, green awning and all, restored exactly the way his father once kept it. He took his father's old hammer down from its nail behind the register and set it on the front counter instead, in plain sight, where every customer passes by it now. Every year, on that same rainy date in autumn, David still leaves the front door unlocked 30 minutes past closing, not because he expects anyone to walk in, but because once someone did.